Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the General Government Budget Committee. It doesn't look like we have a quorum, but we got a couple of people online too, so that makes up for it. So we are good to go. Because we have a quorum, I can ask, are there any bill introductions? Anyone online wanting to introduce a bill? No. Okay, very good. In that case, let's move on. Today, we will be hearing the budgets from the Real Estate Appraisal Board and the Real Estate Commission. So let's, in order to get us started, you're doing it? You drew the short straw? Okay, very good. That would be absolutely fine. As a brief introduction, Budget Analyst Deere is going to take it away. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to go over the committee report out procedures. They're going to be the same as last year. I know some of you have seen these already, so just bear with me as we touch on them really quickly. You should have a one-pager before you, which is a little white page. It should be on top of the folder in front of you. It just means that this year, in order to reduce the volume of in-person contact, signature pages for budget committees will not be utilized, so there's no need to sign the committee report. We will email the committee report out to you on the same day or prior to the day you're going to report out in House Appropriations. In the event that you feel that the committee report does not reflect the will of the committee, just let us know. So go ahead and send us an email. We'll attempt to resolve the conflict. If we're unable to resolve the conflict, we'll let the committee secretary know, and you will be reflected as not having concurred with that committee report recommendation. So that's the process. At this time, are there any questions? All right, so I'm going to touch on the Real Estate Commission budget analysis very briefly. Martin is actually going to give us the presentation, but I was going to point out a couple of the ways that it's different this year than the ways you've seen it in the past. So the front looks very similar with the budget overview. We don't have all the historical data that we used to. We found we just didn't access it that often. You'll then have a couple of tables on page 2 that are going to show you the amount that was approved and the agency request and the governor's recommendation as bar graphs. And we do that for fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023. Here, we're going to have a couple of brief one-paragraph overviews of the request and the governor's recommendation. Turning to page 3, this is very similar to the table we have always included, the summary of operating budget. It's going to give you your categories of operating expenditures as well as your financing. And then for those fee-funded agencies that appear before you, you'll see a couple of special revenue fund tables. These are the primary, for fee-funded agencies, these are the primary way they fund their operations. In this case, it's a real estate fee fund, okay? And this is right here is showing you sort of historical patterns of expenditure for that. Turning to the next page, which is page 4, you see a little greater detail in the more recent years. So you see revenue first in the sort of bluish green, that's the first bar. Then in red, you have expenditures. Okay, so you know that when the red bar is bigger than the blue bar, there's a problem. And then when you see the line that's going across, that's a historical balance in that fund. And so just to sort of give you an image real quick of like what the health of their fee fund is. For those fee-funded agencies that appear before you, you're going to see license fees tables. Those license fee tables will tell you what are the various fees that they charge to regulate their licensed entities, what the current fee that's being charged for those licenses are, what the statutory limit. So for most agencies, their fees are actually written into statute. Okay, you can be below the statutory limit. That's not uncommon. You usually use regulations, but not always, in order to be below that statutory limit. Turning to page 5. This is where the sort of big changes begin to happen. Rather than a heavy focus on sort of the record class of salaries and wages, contractual services, capital outlay, there's much more of a focus on what are the policy changes that have occurred for these various agencies. And so we're going to start at the approved budget from last year. And then almost all the times for these agencies, unless they have SGF, it's going to be no changes to that approved. That creates our starting point. And then we'll describe to you each policy change that has happened by that agency that has caused them to revise that approved amount. And then you're going to see the governor's recommendation, that's item 6 there, and how that's going to adjust it. And then below that, we're going to give a little bit of detail analysis on why each one of those things happened. Turning to page 6, there's just the GovRec. Turning to page 7. This has changed from actual expenditures. We got regular questions about, why is 22 greater than 21? So this provides a little bit of analysis. We haven't done this in the past. We always do the comparison to the approved. Moving to page 8. This will be the 23 analysis. Once again, we're going to be, since you're dealing with a biennial agency, we'll start with the legislative approved because they've already have an approved budget for 23. But those agencies that are non-biennial, we're going to compare it to the previous year's request. And so you're going to see how that they created the request, and we're going to see how that changed from that point. Once again, the various policies that are going to impact that change. Turning to page 10, there's an enhancement request for this agency. So we'll talk anytime you see something in the gray box, that's going to be like enhancement requests or special issues to be dealt with for that particular agencies. Most of the time it's going to be enhancements and supplementals. Sometimes you'll see KBI labs or something like that that's going to be in there. Moving forward to page 11, you have expenditure and FTE positions by program. That's pretty obvious. And for the back page, page 12, that's going to be your program overview. We don't do a lot of program analysis for single program agencies because it's the same thing as the overview for the whole agency. But you will see the sort of data that we talked about for performance-based budgeting before. So you'll see the statutory basis for that program. You'll see their program goals are in the gray box. Then you're going to see a little bit of an overview. Then you're going to see some select measures. Anything that has an asterisk by it, that means that there's none on this one, but if it had an asterisk by it, it would tell you that is not a measure that has been selected by the governor that she uses in her governor's budget report. And so that's just the ones we added to it. Then financing and percent changes and a little bit of funding stuff. So anyway, that's just a brief overview. It looks a little different than the way you've seen it in the past. So we just wanted to make sure before Martin goes into his most thorough analysis that you were familiar with the structure. Does anyone have any questions?
I did. 1 second. Let me get back to it. Yes, and this was a conversation I was having just a little bit earlier in the office. If we wanted to, what's the quickest way to determine the fee fund balance as it stands? Are we looking at the
So it's the yellow line. So if I'm on page 4 and I'm looking at that number and it's labeled below that, you can go see it goes from $963,091 up to $1.1 million. And of course, that's the fee fund balance at the end of June. So it's at the end of the fiscal year. And normally there's going to be a little bit of text below that that's going to tell you what the lowest month projected ending balance is. And that's just because June may not be the lowest point that fee fund is going to hit. It sort of depends on the pattern of revenues and expenditures as they flow into the fund.
All right. I couldn't see the number written inside the bar graphs there. I won't go into the joys of color blindness. Okay, very good. That answers that question. Committee, are there any other questions? Yes. Fire away, Representative French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, is the rule that we're going to use then that these figures like on, I think it was page 2 on the charts, is we're going to go 1 decimal point rounded up or down? Is that what we're going to use?
You can make any adjustments you want to make, and in whatever dollar amount. I would ask you to do whole dollars. It becomes difficult in the accounting system to track less than whole dollars. But if you want to see the exact dollars, you can see them on the front table, or you can see them in the sum up bud table on page 3.
Right. I think the charts need to reflect more than 1 decimal point, especially in something like this when there's changes in the years. It looks like it jumps a whole $100,000 in 1 year. In reality, it doesn't. So it's all because of the round off.
That's correct. It's only a $21,000 increase.
So
Yeah.
they're kind of confusing, those two boxes.
All right, well, I appreciate that, and we'll provide that feedback to our team who's putting this together. And this is not a fixed document at this point. It's sort of an exploratory document, so I'll take that feedback back to our team.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
While we're on that, if you could have JG look at the figure 6 box there, that'd be fantastic. And I kind of understand each other on that regard.
I will, we'll touch base. I think it's unlikely that he has not complained about the same thing at some point. So I will touch base with him about it.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions from the Brady Bunch? No, I see none. No one's raising their hand? Very good. All right, Dylan, I think you've done it. Thank you. All right, Budget Analyst DeBoer, you're up. After that great warm-up act.
Yes, thank you, Chairman and Committee. My name is Martin DeBoer. I'm a fiscal analyst with Legislative Research. I understand we're starting with Real Estate Commission.
State Commission, that's what I have pulled up.
Fantastic. So, as Dylan mentioned before, the first few pages are a general overview of the agency. You'll have the budget overview as well as some of the fee funds and their licensing fees. I would like to begin on page 5 for the FY 2022 analysis. At the top of the page, you have the breakdown of the legislative approved, the agency revised estimate, and the governor's recommendation. Starting at the top, right underneath the chart, you have the legislative approved. There were no adjustments made by the legislature to the approved amount of $340,802. The agency therefore requests a revised estimate of $340,802, all from special revenue funds, and this is the same as the FY 2022 approved amount.
Excuse me one moment. Where are we again? Because I'm not seeing those numbers.
That was the appraisal board.
Ah, okay. Okay, because all of a sudden the Real Estate Commission was really operating on a shoestring.
My apologies there. So for a Real Estate Commission, we're on page 5 for the FY 2022. Here we have an approved amount, legislative approved amount of 1.3 million, all from special revenue funds. And this is an increase of 21,000 or 1.6% above the FY 2022 amount. And these increased expenditures are in salaries and wages in the amount of $1,737, 0.2%. Some contractual services increases of $20,914. And then there's a decreased expenditures in commodities of just over $700 and in capital outlay of $250. So down there below, those numbers correspond with what's in the chart up above. So for their FTE positions, the agency estimate includes 12 FTE positions. This is 0.3 above the approved amount. This increase is attributable to 2 part-time positions being changed to full-time positions due to increased volume of work as a result of a record number of active real estate licenses. The one below, on the background checks, there's an increase in contractual services related to background checks, the cost of administration through the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. The KBI does bill the agency for fingerprinting, background checks, and criminal history reports. There was a decrease in the agency's private vehicle mileage of $3,578. And then in all other adjustments that were made, they were deleting $1,980, mostly in various contractual service fees. And this is partially offset by an adjustment to fringe benefits and expenditures in salaries. On the following page, at the top of the page, on page 6, you'll see the governor's recommendation, and the governor concurs with the agency's FY 2022 revised estimate. And I'll stand for questions on 22.
Right, the committee, I will call attention to the background checks. Everything we do has a dollar sign attached to it. And this is an excellent example. We wanted to make sure that we had background checks on all of our realtors. And here's where we see the dollar sign being attached and the cost from KBI to the agency that's then passed on to the licensees. I would imagine, although I haven't seen an increase in, I don't see an increase in the real estate license fees. Is that correct? Okay. I would anticipate at some point we would, but what's the fee fund balance looking like here?
The fee fund balance is located on page 4.
Yep. I just had to scroll back to it. Not seeing a hit there yet. They're not anticipating one for fiscal year 23? Okay. Very good. Committee, any questions? Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Martin, just so that I understand, they don't expect an increase, they don't expect an increase in any of their budget because of the increase in the number of realtors or licenses? Is that why you had mentioned earlier?
Let me try and understand.
I can probably clarify a little bit. Based on what he was saying, the two part-time people being moved to full-time did increase some of the operating expenses due to the record number of licenses. I would anticipate, though, that the extra revenue from the extra licenses probably makes up for that. Am I understanding that correctly?
I anticipate so. We do look directly at the expenditure levels. So if the agency feels that it can absorb those expenditures within their existing resources, that's where we're at.
Thanks, Martin. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Representative French.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a question for you. Have we heard anything about the governor's request in the budget this year for salary increases for the state employees? And how that's going to affect these other budgets we're going to be looking at?
Right. These budgets were prepared before any of that took place, so I doubt that any of them will reflect that 5% increase that was being discussed. Am I correct on this, Analyst Deere?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you are correct. So the way they did that is they appropriated that to the State Finance Council, Legislative Coordinating Council. They appropriated it as a global in one spot, and they rely on the State Finance Council to certify the amount of the adjustments if it's later approved. So that you won't see a 5% salary adjustment reflected in any of these budgets.
Okay.
That's not true of other adjustments, like, Department of Corrections and stuff like that. So there are other salary adjustments, but just that global 5%
It's not in any of these?
is not in any of these.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Representative Wagner.
One or two kind of questions just for understanding. The Real Estate Commission, is it located in a state building? I mean, they just get they're not they don't own their own building. They're just part of the typical state property from the Department of Administration. Oh, in a private lease. Okay. Thank you. And I do have kind of a question. I'm just looking here on some back information on the fees for professional services that I can see. I actually have fiscal year 2020. It was 68.8, jumped up to like 120,000. Your fiscal year 2021 actual, back down to 95. What are those fees and why would they vary so much as far as for this department?
I do not have that information in front of me right now, but I can definitely look into that for you.
Okay, no, thank you. And just for point of clarification, again, you have 12 full-time equivalent positions, but how many people are actually working for the department or for this agency? Is it literally that many or it is? Okay, so you do have 12 full-time people. Okay, all right, just want to clarify. Thank you very much.
All right. Any further questions, including those from the Secret Square? Seeing none.
All right,
All
thank
right,
you.
I guess we can move on to the Real Estate Appraisal Board.
Sorry, Chairman, we haven't not talked about FY23 yet.
You are correct. All right, let's talk about fiscal year 23.
All right. Fiscal year 23 starts on page 8. So at the top of the page, you'll see the same breakdown, legislative approved. Since it is biennial, they do have an FY23 approved budget, broken down by agency request and the governor's recommendation. So for FY23, the agency requests a revised estimate of 1.4 million, all from special revenue funds. This is an increase of $27,630, or 2.1% above the FY23 approved amount. This is due to enhancement request for legal representation, for fees related to legal representation by the Attorney General in the amount of $7,100. Agency also increased the contractual services expenditures by $25,000 for the cost of administering background checks required for the original licensing application. And this is conducted by the FBI and their fingerprinting. So down below, you'll see the enhancement request. This is the $7,100, all from special revenue funds for the Kansas Attorney General fee increases for their legal representation. The background checks, similar as before, are provided through Kansas Bureau of Investigation. You have private vehicle mileage there, a decrease of vehicle mileage expenditures of $3,278. There's also a decrease in the meals and lodging of $6,169. And then for their FTE positions, again, you have the 12 FTE positions with that 0.3 FTE position increase due to those part-time positions becoming full-time. On the following page, on top of page 9, the all other adjustments. The agency made some adjustments and that increased, with an increase of $4,987 attributed to their credit card processing fees. And that was in the amount of about $2,750 and their conference fees of $3,090. And just below that, you'll have the governor's recommendation, and the governor concurs with the agency's FY23 request. And I'll stand for questions on FY23.
All right. Analyst Board, couple of questions. First off, the fee increase from the Attorney General's office, are we going to see that in every agency that the AG helps to provide services for?
I cannot speak to all the other agencies. I do know other agencies of mine have not included that, and some have. So some may feel that they can absorb that cost, some feel that they can't. So if the agency has pointed it out to us and made it clear, it is included.
All righty. And this actually might be a question for the agency regarding the mileage, so we'll get to that here in a minute. Am I to understand, though, that on the next page with the conference fees, it seems like, all right, I've slept since last year, but not very many times. It seems like those conference fees went down because of COVID. Nobody was able to travel, and now we're seeing that come back. Is that what I'm understanding?
That is most likely, although the agency has not identified specifically as why they went down. But
Okay. All right. Well,
COVID.
we'll probably get with him in a minute. Questions for the analyst for 2023? Yes, Representative Wagner.
This is a little bit of sort of a meta question on, but I remember it had come up last year. But so if a state agency had any sort of lobbying expenses, where does that show up in any particular place, or is it just sort of, is it just assumed into fees? You know, if they, I mean, I know there was some sort of post-audit report or something that state agency spent like $1.4 million last year on lobbying or something. Where in these reports would we find that? As far as like, I'm in the 406, 410 report. Is there an answer? Is there an answer? Would you know? I'm not, I know this is a little bit out of the blue, but.
I think I'll pass that along to Dylan.
So there's no object code for lobbying fees that's going to appear. The chairman is correct. Some of them will appear in contractual services if they hire an outside lobbying firm. However, in many cases, the people that would come to visit you, you might think of as a lobbyist or state employees, maybe they're talking to you about the budget. So then it would simply be salaries and wages at that point. And so it's simply, it'll vary, but there's no single line that would appear inside the budget.
Okay, thank you. I will have another question, but it eludes me right at the moment.
Any further questions for the budget analyst for 2023? Anyone online? Going once? Okay. Very good. One moment before we jump to the Real Estate Appraisal Board, I believe that we have Eric Wisner, the Executive Director of the Real Estate Commission, here with us. Giving me head nods and head shakes every once in a while, so I knew whether I was on track or not. Welcome to committee.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Eric Wisner. I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas Real Estate Commission. I don't have any formal testimony. I would just maybe highlight a couple of big picture things at the Real Estate Commission and then try to answer a couple of the questions just to fill in some information. So the Real Estate Commission, what we do is we license individuals to transact real estate. So we have two license types. We have brokers and salespersons. As you can probably expect, with the housing market and just the booming nature of housing and housing prices, we've seen a pretty dramatic increase in the number of individuals who have obtained their license. And honestly, we get a lot of turnover in this industry. So there's been a lot of people who maybe in the past have decided not to keep their real estate license, keep their real estate license. So what that's led to is basically we currently have not only a record number of licensees, but we also have a record number of complaints in the last fiscal year. And obviously we have other records related to just the amount of revenue that comes in. One of the items that was brought up was the FBI background check. So every individual who applies for a license is required to essentially submit their fingerprints in order for the commission to obtain a criminal history report from the KBI FBI. So that's $60 goes for. We never know exactly from year to year how many people are going to apply. We do our best to estimate that, but oftentimes we're wrong. So that's why it looks like we're spending additional money for that. But really all it is a pass through for fees that we collect in order to provide those to the KBI. I know there was a couple of questions related to expenses and kind of what those are for. I thought I'd hit on those just to kind of give you a little bit more background maybe. I know that there was some discussion on, why are, for instance, private mileage fees less, food or, expenses for those food. Honestly, every time we do a commission meeting via Zoom versus having one in person, that's about $1,200 to $1,500 less in total expenses. A big chunk of that is private mileage. For example, right now I have 5 commission members. 2 reside in the Wichita area, 1 lives in Hayes, 1 lives in Topeka, and then I have 1 in Kansas City. So private mileage for 3 of them to travel a significant distance can add up pretty quickly. As far as staff goes, we don't do much traveling. We do a couple, 4 or 5 in-person staff meetings a year that there's some private mileage there, but for the most part, that's not a significant expense. I will say that we do have 5 staff. 5 of my 12 staff members are remote employees. That was actually the case pre-pandemic and actually set us up to kind of have a model in place to conduct work. Even I know some other agencies were trying to figure it out. Well, we already had everybody on laptops and they were used to working from home. So we kind of kept it going. There was a question on conference fees. So the reason why there's additional conference fees in fiscal year 23, there's 2 reasons. One is in general, inflation. Conference fees have dramatically increased over the last year. And from what I understand, they're going to continue to increase. The other thing is I've actually been selected as president-elect of our national association that represents all real estate commissions. So I actually take office in August, September of 2022. So the commission requested that to include in the budget for a few extra people for the commission to attend that meeting in late August, early September. So that's why there's a little bit higher fee in 23. That's probably just a one-time thing. I think I got everything, but if I missed something, I'd be happy to address that.
Right. Any questions for the agency? Representative French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This probably doesn't apply to the budget as much, but I was just wondering, do you track the number of active agents versus those that are just retaining their license?
Representative, that's a good question. Sort of. We do have, when you have a license, you can either maintain it in active status or inactive status. Basically, inactive is I'm just holding my license. I'm not actually doing anything that requires a license, but it's there just in case I want to reactivate it. We have approximately, I think it's around 14 or 15,000 that are active, and then the remainder, so roughly 3,000 to 3,500 that are inactive. We did see a pretty big jump in people who went inactive right when the pandemic started, but we're seeing them come back into active status. There were also some issues with the governors did several executive orders that extended expiration dates. So that kind of muddled the issue a little bit, but that's kind of the overall breakdown. Now, we do know that there are a lot of people that are in active status who don't really transact real estate. I believe there's some statistic from the National Association of Realtors, but I want to say that they estimate that over 50% of their members which there's a difference between being a realtor and having a real estate license, but I think they estimate that over 50% are actually only part-time in transacting real estate, that they have another part-time or a full-time job.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Right. Further questions? Yes, Representative.
You said there were 3,000 inactive licenses, and how many active licenses?
I think it's around 15.
15,000?
Yeah, it's usually somewhere around 80-20 as far as the breakdown. 80% are active, 20% inactive. Obviously, there's a lot more salespersons. The percentage of salespersons that are inactive is higher than brokers. Usually, if you have a broker's license, you're pretty committed to being in this industry. And you have to have a broker's license in order to be a supervising broker of a company. So,
Representative French for the second time.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate. You have any projections of the future for the sales personnel? Or is it going to go up dramatically, or do you see a drop off, or any kind of projection on where we're going with licensees?
That's a really good question. So historically, we do have a way we've estimated licensee numbers. What we've seen is it is somewhat related to the number of homes sold. So usually it's about an 18 to 24 month delay. So as home sales go up, it usually takes about 18 months for it to direct. The wave kind of goes together, but they're about 18 months separated. Obviously, with the pandemic, that kind of affected home sales. But then actually, and it's in our budget narrative that we submit, there's actually a table that I put on there where it tracks the bar chart basically is the number of home sales, and this is the number of licensees. Well, you can see this one for fiscal year 21. That's a pretty big jump. So I am thinking we're going to probably continue to see license counts go up. However, if something changes related to home sales, then that number will go down. And I will tell you, probably we are more cyclical than any other board and commission that is out there with respect to revenues. I did some research related to our overall our overall revenues. And yeah, our fee fund carryover right now is sitting better than probably it's been in a long time. In fact, I believe the last time it was this high was in 2008. Now, fast forward into 2012, and that 1.1 million that we had in 08 was down under $300,000. So, most other boards and commissions, at least that do occupational licensing, don't see the ebb and flow that we do with the Real Estate Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wisner, for being here today. Question, in looking at your 2023 adjusted budget request, it has your anticipated rent in 23 of being $51,000, which is $5,000 over the 2022 adjusted budget. You adding square footage, or is that just the anticipated increase in rent?
Very good question. So the reason the rent goes up in fiscal year 23 is we signed a 10-year lease for our place that we rent in Jayhawk Tower. The first 5 years were at a rate, and then it increased, I believe, 70 cents a square foot starting in the 6th year, and fiscal year 2023 is the 6th year of that lease. So that's why it goes up. When we relocated in 2017, we actually downsized from about 4,700 square feet to 3,500 square feet. So we're in a pretty good spot with respect to space. There's not too much vacant area. I mean, when we're full staffed and everybody's in the office, but that's why the increase in rent occurs in fiscal year 23. I don't anticipate, though, that will not change for the next 4 fiscal years after that. That will remain steady.
Okay, so it's not going up 70 cents a square foot per year.
Year 1 through 5 is a rate, and then year 6 through 10 is a rate.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further question? Yes, Representative Wagner. Second time.
I just have to ask, you said you have 35,000 square feet?
3,500.
3,500, okay.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's a lot of real estate. All right, no further questions. Thank you for being here, Director Wisner. I pronounced it correctly this time. I missed it the first time.
I'm used to it. Whatever you say it is. Thank you for your time today.
All right, committee, I wouldn't say it's exactly a shift in gears, but a little bit. And let's look at the Real Estate Appraisal Board and Analyst DeBoer once again.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This time I'm sure I got the right one in front of me. So on the first page of the Real Estate Appraisal Board, very similar, you have the breakdown and a general budget overview. Next couple pages will highlight their expenditures and financing, as well as the appraiser fee fund. This is, again, another fee-funded agency, as well as a biennial. On the bottom of page 4, the second half, you do see some of their licensing fees listed there. So on page 5, we begin with the FY 2022 analysis. At the top of the page, you'll have the legislative approved, as well as any agency changes and the governor's recommendation. So the legislative approved amount of $340,802 had no adjustments made to it. So the agency's revised estimate is $340,802 off from special revenue funds, which is the same as the approved amount. Now, within that approved amount, there was a little bit of shift in allocation of the funding. So you had some increased expenditures in salaries and wages for base salary and capital outlay of $1,000. The agency did reallocate contractual services expenditures from outside counsel fees to a new information technology database project. With that agency request or estimate, it does include 2 FTE positions, which is the same as the approved number. The bottom of page 5, you have the governor's recommendation, and the governor concurs with the agency's revised estimate. And I'll stand for questions on FY22.
Committee, any questions for Analyst DeBoer? I am looking at the outlay of $1,000 for printers. I'm assuming they're not using the Department of Administration Print Center?
I do not know what they're using.
All right. Representative Wagner. Sorry, I was engrossed.
No, that's no problem. Looking at the 406, 410 report, you have this item 5,700 other non-expenses of like $137,000. And what exactly is that? I know they had it, the prior year was 171,000, and I don't I don't see my notes from last year as to what that would have been. I mean, it's a good chunk of your budget, actually.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and the representative. I don't believe I have that information in front of me right now, but I can look into that for you.
I mean, it doesn't show up, as what you have in your, just for point of reference, what you have on the front page on the budget overview, is the 340,802, but then on this, there is another item that's another 116,000 that gives total expenditures of 457,507. And I don't know if you can find out what the heck that is, because that's quite a difference.
Yes, I'll take a look.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any further questions? Do we have any online? Seeing none. Yes. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you, Representative French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one reason why I don't like this new format. All we're getting is last year's budget and then the 2022-23 budget. We're going to have to go back to the previous years to figure out the changes are significant or not. And we've been on this committee a while. We can go back and do that, but to me, we ought to just have it in front of us. Plus the fact any new members on the committee will not have that information. So we're dealing with just current and not really realizing if there's been any major changes in their budget over the last few years. So just a comment. Know if we can change it at this point in time, but I can go back and check my records, but others may not be able to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Right. Analyst, dear, is that something that we could look into, historical data? I know it adds a significant amount to the report.
Certainly, I mean, I don't think we've ever provided that specifically, like object level or even record class level, like long-term historical trends. There's only ever been sort of total level of expenditures year over year. That is still, their total level of expenditures is reflected in the front sort of overview section. It is something we look into, particularly if there is a specific agency that you're interested in. We can produce a report for you and just let us know which one that is, and we can see when we pull together. But it is not something we've explored, that level of detailed, like historical data. There is an appropriation report, which is on our website. That appropriations report does detail all of the changes that happened last year or whatever previous year you want to look at. So if you ever have any questions about what the legislature did do finally after it got all the way through the budget process, it is reflected on that appropriations report on our website.
I just like the historical background we had on the other reports from the last few years. For us that have not been here as long as the Honorable Chairman, it's just nice to know where this agency is going and where it's been. So I'm not sure you can change it, but like I said, it doesn't bother me, but it might bother some new members of the committee trying to figure out where this agency is coming from. Thank you.
Chairman, that is definitely some feedback, and I appreciate that, and that's some feedback I can bring back to our team.
While you're presenting that feedback, let's edit out the part where he called me old. Analyst DeBoer, one other thing I noticed on the 406, 410 report was a pretty drastic increase in allocation 600 and 700 fees, other services, and fee professional services in 22. Any insight into that?
Yes, and I had a conversation with the agency about this. It's also reflected on page 6 on the change from actuals. That's the contractual services, the 66,000. The agency mentioned that there has been a uptick in new applications coming in, and these need contract reviewers. And in FY21, they didn't spend all their budgeted expenditure funds on those contract reviews. There's a huge uptick in new applications, so that's why you're seeing an increase in expenditure in those expenses for FY22.
Excellent, thank you. It's doubtful, but it's very possible that I could be asked about that in appropriations. So the reason for that is increased filing?
Yes, so the agency hires contract reviewers to review all these new applications that are coming in. And because there is an increase of new applications over what was in FY21, that's why you see a disparity of the increase there. They did have more money budgeted in FY21, they didn't use it, therefore it's at a lower number, and you see a larger separation.
Gotcha. All right, I've made something resembling a note here that I might be able to decode later. All right, any further questions regarding fiscal year 22? Any online? Representative Wagner.
Okay, sorry to jump back to some of these disparities, but what exactly, I have a fiscal year 2020 actual expenditures was like 331,776, and then it dropped in fiscal year 2021 to 268,759. Why would it drop so much in fiscal year 2021? And then it jumps back, obviously, in 22 and 23.
Can I ask where you're looking?
I have the 406, 410 report and it has the fiscal year 2020 actuals. That this total reportable expenditures that it shows for 2020 was 331,776, and then it dropped quite a lot in 2021, but then it comes back up in 2022. Did COVID do something that dropped everything? It seems like it's the fees, professional service fees, and the fees, other services took a dramatic drop. I just didn't know if the agency had a comment on why it had dropped.
They have not made any comments to me, but it's something I can follow up on.
Okay, no, thank you.
All right, further questions regarding fiscal year 22? Seeing none, let's progress to fiscal year 23.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fiscal year 23 starts on page 7. At the top of the page, you have the breakdown of legislative approved, as well as agency request and the governor's recommendation. So there were no changes made to the legislative approved amount of $344,867. That was appropriated by the 21 legislature. We are missing some language there for agency requests, so my apologies. Good thing it's marked draft. But the agency is requesting the approved amount of $344,867, as well as the 2 FTE positions, which was in the approved amount. The bottom there, the governor concurs with the agency's FY23 revised estimate. So I'll stand for questions on FY23.
All right, well, no changes, no enhancements, and the governor agrees. I think the questions could be somewhat limited. Do we have questions? Yes, Representative Wagner.
I do have a question. Total salaries and wages for this department, there's 2 full-time positions, and it comes to 186,667. Is one a secretary, one's a director, or what are the positions that you folks have, or this department has?
I believe that their titles are executive director and then deputy director. The second position I will have to look into specifically.
There's an executive director and a deputy director.
Correct. I believe so. The second position I will have to look into, but that's what comes to mind.
So they don't have an administrative staff at all? It's just 2. What does that mean?
Sally up here.
Oh, okay. No.
Other questions for the Analyst DeBoer? regarding fiscal year 23? Any online? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Analyst DeBoer.
Thank you, Chairman.
Also from the agency, we have Executive Director Sally Pritchard, who may be able to shed some light on some of the questions that we brought up.
Some of this. Good afternoon. I'm just here to answer any questions you may have about our budget. We have no issues, but I know that Representative Wagner had a couple, and I think I can explain those pretty quick. I believe that fund you were talking about, the 65,000, that money, it's simply money we take for the Federal Registry. It's like a pass-through. So when an appraiser is licensed, they pay us $40, and we pay that to the Federal Registry. And the AMCs do the same type of thing. And I believe I can answer the other question about the big discrepancy between 2020 and 2021, I believe you said. I believe that was the year that we had a bunch of encumbered money for some of those reviewers because we still had reviews out. So we had money encumbered that didn't get unencumbered by the end of the fiscal year. At this point in time, we still had a fairly new person. I didn't think, it just kind of slipped both of us. It was a major amount. I mean, and on besides that, we didn't spend. So we were looking like we had, it was about 65 or something. It all went back into the fee fund. It was some weird amount. I can't remember right off, but I knew it last year.
So it was not for a Tesla.
And Carol, this has been a person agency. I think at one time we had a third person. So that person's position has increased. It's not a deputy, it's not, I'm still the one who is going to go down with the ship, you know what I mean? I'm just kidding, but she does very high level work too, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I mean, she might be open in the mail. We both just kind of have to get in there and do what needs to be done. We could both be doing renewals one day. She could be, we built the database this last year. Well, she was pretty much the main person working with the computer people. So titles are deceiving, I guess. And we could have named her pretty much whatever we wanted. So we picked this one because it was different what the old employee was. And I'm sorry, that sounds about as stupid as
Works for me. I don't know.
And I thought deputy director puts her in a bad spot. You know what I mean? When they call it. So that's all. It was just a matter of.
It does put a target on your back. It does put a target on your back.
And I mean, the salaries, mine's about 75 a year, hers is about 60. So we're obviously, I get more than she does.
And then when you figure the benefits in, that's where that comes from. All right. Any further questions for the agency? Yes, Representative French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you explain a little bit about current active appraisal management companies? Is this is what you used for appraisals? Does this go into the individual companies to get their appraisers?
We have a lot of federal oversight, but at one point in time, if you wanted to use, because it had to be taken out of the appraisal, the banks and the lenders, they had to go through a third, and this gets kind of deep for me to explain. So appraisal management companies wanted to get theirs into that. So then lenders could use, who didn't fill another requirement, could use the appraisal management. So there was no connection whatsoever between the appraiser and the lender. And we weren't going to do it, but they were going to come and get legislation in place to get it done. And it was better us to make the rules than them, you know.
Is that us? I get it.
No, appraisal management companies. But, so, I mean, does that explain what you're asking?
I'm not sure you have. I'm trying to decide exactly how you use these management companies in your agency.
We don't. We only register them. It's their,
Oh, you register them.
we register them. and
Okay.
they work for lender.
So they don't work for you. I got it. Okay. And then so it's significant that we also know the number of new real estate appraisal management companies that are registered every year by you.
And it is for fees because we do. collect.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sally, question, and this may be for our staff also. I couldn't help but notice that the anticipated fee fund in 2023 is to be at $180,000, and that was at 2021, it was 283, so it's down about 100. So we've used quite a bit to be able to fund the budget, as I see. At what point does how low does that budget have to, or how low does that fund have to get before we start looking at licenses and the cost of?
I think we're really, because me and the budget analyst, we look at that each summer when we redo the budget. And we both felt like we were still quite a ways off before that's really going to be necessary. And again, it's because we're trying to decrease the fee fund a little bit. And we don't want to increase fees if at all necessary. But at the same time, we haven't done that since like 2015. That would come back. I'd rather go small than big, where we would have enough time to maybe $15, $25. I mean, it's watched, but yeah, I kind of wonder the same thing when I see that chart. And then another minute, I'm thinking, well, we're. So I rely a lot on the budget analyst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Sally, I appreciate that. Anytime that I see $100,000 drop in a fee fund over a couple year period, and I appreciate, everybody using your revenues to be able to give, your licensees, a pass on having a raise. I think that that's really important, but I just want to make sure that we are managing that fund and everybody's looking at that and understanding there does come a point. So anyway, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Sally, I appreciate it.
Representative Wagner.
Yes, I do have one or two questions, just briefly. So you folks, on your rent, you have offices where, as far as your offices that you use, where are they located? Are they in a state building or are they where?
Jayhawk Tower.
Oh, they're in Jayhawk Tower too. All right. And
We've got three small offices. One's a workroom.
Uh-huh.
She's got a small office. I got a bigger office.
I see. How many square feet? I'm just, if you don't mind me asking.
I cannot.
Yeah, okay, that's okay.
Trying to picture it until you're on.
So if I could also ask, you don't use the Department of Administration, you don't use them for like IT services or anything at all? I mean, they're pretty much you kind of have your own things in-house.
I mean, of course, we all use OITS for computer type things, but as far as like a printer, I mean, we're talking a personal printer to print out a letter, nothing major. We do have a Savin copier that if we're printing, and if it's, if we're going to print out major quantities of something, we would go to the state printer.
Okay, thank you.
Right, and that hit my question too, so very good. Any further questions? Representative French.
Thanks again for being here. I apologize for all these questions, but you've got an agency I'm not real familiar with. On the appraisal management companies registrations, and they have to be renewed, how often?
Once a year.
Every year they have to renew, and that's the $900 fee to renew. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, any further questions? Online? All right, very good. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Excellent.
All right, committee, that concludes the work that we have scheduled for today. I don't know what we have scheduled for tomorrow, but I'm sure it's a lot. So take these budgets home with you, review them, and I don't know if we'll be working them tomorrow or the next day. I can't recall for sure, but get things under control and understood by tomorrow. And that way, if we have time permitting tomorrow, we will be able to work them. Yes, Tyler, we're not working them?
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to mention, tomorrow is Kansas Insurance Department, and the plan is to work the budgets for these two budgets and make recommendations.
Oh, very good. Okay, we are working these budgets tomorrow, and we'll also be hearing from the Kansas Department of Insurance. So it'll be an action-packed, thrilling adventure. Be sure to get your sleep and eat your Wheaties. Until that time, we are adjourned.